electric guitar? A Strat or a Les Paul? Hey guys, welcome back to the Bald Shredder channel. Today we are here to talk about the age-old dispute that has been going on basically since the dawn of time, and that is the battle of the Stratocaster guitar versus the Les Paul guitar. Now I thought this would be an interesting video to do for me because recently I uploaded a video about why I don't prefer the traditional 3 single coil Strat style guitar. And I also did a video a while back talking about why I don't really prefer a Les Paul style guitar. If you haven't seen those videos yet and you want to check them out, I'll put links in the description for you. There is no right or wrong answer to this. It is all about personal preference. Some people love Strats and that's all they want to play. Some people love Les Pauls and they can't imagine playing anything else. Both guitar designs are absolutely iconic and have been played by some of the best, most influential, most amazing players throughout the history of electric guitar. So there's no denying the impact that the Strat and the Les Paul has had on the guitar playing world and continues to have. Alright, let's start off with the fact that a Strat has a bolt-on neck, whereas a Les Paul has a glued-in set neck. I have to say I like the bolt-on neck more for several reasons. A lot of times on a guitar, I'm not quite happy with like the action or the angle of the strings in relation to the neck, and I end up having to take the neck off and shim the neck, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot. You can't do that on a Les Paul, obviously. The other thing I like about the neck on a Strat is that, well, unless you get one that's covered in high gloss, but you don't have to. Anyway, you can do the back of the neck like unfinished. And the way I like to do it on my custom guitars is I finish the back of the neck in tongue oil. And you can't really do that on a typical traditional Les Paul because it's going to be clear coated in high gloss. Also guys, Strats have a tendency to have a thinner neck profile where Les Pauls are a little bit bigger, thicker, chunkier. I prefer the thinner neck profile. Now on your traditional, stereotypical Strat, you've got 3 single coil pickups, whereas a Les Paul's got 2 humbucker pickups. I much prefer the power and the high output that you can get out of humbucker pickups. It's much better for my style of like 80s hard rock playing. So I gotta go with the pickups in a Les Paul compared to the weak sounding single coils in a Strat. Okay, and what about the body shapes? The Les Paul is famous for its single cut design, and the Strat has a double cut design. And the part on the single cut design on the Les Paul that's a little problematic for me is that, well, I do all my playing sitting down, guys. I don't play live, I'm not in a band or anything, so I'm always in here recording in my bedroom sitting down. And when I'm sitting down with this guy on my lap, because this area right here, right, this is where my leg's gonna go, this area is not very big, and the guitar kind of has a tendency to sort of slide down, or at least it feels like it's sliding down my leg a lot, so I always feel like I'm pulling it back up. Whereas on the Strat, it's much more material right here, and for whatever reason, that just doesn't happen. And I'm sure that also has something to do with the weight of the guitar. The Strat has a lot less weight in the back end than a Les Paul does. There's a lot of weight back here in a Les Paul, which is another thing that's gonna kind of like pull it down my leg like that. What about looks, guys? If I'm just looking at your traditional Strat with the pickguard and the 3 single coils and your traditional Les Paul with the 2 humbuckers like this, I would much prefer the looks of the Les Paul. I think it's a much prettier, more beautiful guitar than the Strat with the 3 single coils and the pickguard. On the Les Paul, you can see much more of the finish, and although this one does have a small pickguard on it, it's not absolutely necessary. You could have a Les Paul with a pickguard or without it. Whereas on the Strat, you've got to have that pickguard because that's what's holding the pickups up, the knobs and the switch, everything's connected to that pickguard. So based purely on looks, I'm gonna go with the Les Paul. Now what about the thickness of the body? The Les Paul is a much thicker, heavier guitar. A Strat, a little bit thinner, doesn't weigh as much. How about the bridges? Well, on your Les Paul, you've got a tune-o-matic type bridge. It's not a whammy bridge, it's kind of like a hardtail in that there's no springs back there, there's no whammy bar, but it does kind of stick up from the body more than the bridge on a Strat, and feels maybe not quite the same. And then on the Strat, you've got the 6-screw vintage style trem bridge, which is lower down to the body. And the thing that I like about this bridge compared to the 2-pneumatic on the Les Paul is that all 6 saddles are adjustable individually. All right, guys, let's bottom line this thing here. I think the Les Paul is a nicer looking, prettier guitar. I like the sound better in the Les Paul because it's got the humbucker pickups instead of the single coil pickups. However, I do like the fact that the Strat has the bolt-on neck, a much thinner neck, and I like the body shape probably as far as comfort for playing. So in the end, guys, if I had to choose between the traditional Les Paul guitar and the traditional Strat style guitar, I'm gonna go with the Strat. Yeah, I'm not a real big fan of the single coil pickups, but I'm gonna give that up just because the neck is so much more comfortable for me to play on than a Les Paul. And it just feels more comfortable being held in my lap. It weighs less. Also the headstock, guys, the Fender headstock is straight, whereas the Les Paul headstock is angled back. I mean, that doesn't really affect playing, but what if you drop it? What if it falls off the guitar stand? I'm sure you must have seen lots of pictures with Les Pauls. They're notorious for this, getting the headstock broken off because it's at an angle, and if it hits the ground, all that pressure goes right there and snap. That's not gonna happen probably with a Strat. Also, guys, I forgot to mention, the Les Paul has a scale length of 24.75 and a Strat has a scale length of 25.5. That's not a huge deal, but I do have to say that since most of my guitars have a scale length of 25.5, when I go to play the Les Paul, I do notice it at first a little bit, and it takes a little bit getting used to, but it's not really a big deal. Okay guys, so in this bald shredder battle of the Les Paul versus the Strat does win. But remember what I said, neither the Les Paul or the traditional Strat are really my ideal guitar. Really for me, the best guitar is like you take the best features on a Les Paul, which is the humbucker pickups and the heavier, meatier tone that you get out of a Les Paul, and then you combine it with all the best features of a Strat, and you end up with something like this. A Super Strat, or a Dinky in this case. It's got the neck like a Fender, unfinished, tongue oil, super fast, great access up here, 2 humbuckers like a Les Paul, so you get that great, meaty, crunchy 80s tone that I love. And it's not as heavy as a Les Paul, it's not as awkward when I'm sitting and playing it, so yeah, this is my ideal guitar right here. Alright guys, so what do you think? Now I know if a Les Paul that's your guitar, that's your favorite, that's your number one, you're gonna say, I would prefer a Les Paul, obviously. If you love the Strat, and that's your ideal, that's your best guitar, you're gonna say you love the Strat. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Are there any other guys out there like me where a Les Paul and a Strat, neither one of them is really your first choice, but if that's the case and you had to play only one or the other, which one would you pick and why? Alright guys, thanks for watching and I'll see you next time.